Welcome to the Waffle Podcast, where we speak to senior leaders and business owners in the US staffing space who have achieved significant scale. Today on the Waffle, I'm joined by Tom Shaw. Tom lived and studied in the US and then went back to the UK to start his recruitment career at S3 in the UK back in 2003. He then moved back out to the US in 2005, where he settled in Denver. He was $1 million per year producer for many years before launching his own staffing firm, Locus Consulting, back in 2016. His business was then acquired in 2023 by CDW, Fortune 500, $25 billion systems integration business. We discuss his recruitment and business journey with particular focus on the launch and scale of his own firm and the subsequent acquisition. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Tom Shaw, how you doing, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are we doing?
Not bad. Can't complain. Thanks
good
for
to
being
see
on.
ya. No problem.
Yeah, how's life, mate? Over in Denver?
It's pretty good, mate. It's pretty good. Can't complain. It's not 100 degrees every day anymore, so it's
Yeah.
getting a little bit more palatable for my British blood. But other than that, it's all good.
Yeah, weather-wise in Denver, does it get really cold in the winter?
It does, but it's not crazy, right? Like it, everyone's like, oh, what's it like there? The sun shines 300 days a year. So even when it's snowed out, yeah. So even when it's snowed out, you can still get like pretty good sunshine and that. And there are a few weeks there where it gets super cold. Like
Yeah,
obviously compared to Florida, it's pretty bone chilling. But
yeah.
yeah, I think it'll get you know minus numbers every now and again, but it stays pretty palatable.
You know
Even
what?
when there's snow on the ground, it's pretty nice.
You know what? When people say to me like, "Oh, the weather and and everything else," and they moan about the summer in Miami or South Florida, um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it does get hot, and it does get sometimes where you can't do a great deal outside, and stuff like that. But what I always say is, if I look in the sky and the sun's shining and I've got shorts and t-shirt on, then I'm happy. And even if it's cold,
Right.
like New York kind of weather and Chicago maybe and whatever,
Yep.
then as long as the sun's shining compared to not kicking the UK, but or Manchester particularly, like when you look in the sky and it's grey and it's raining and it's windy, you know what I mean? That's when it's depressing.
300,
So,
300
so
days a year of that, right?
Mate,
So yeah.
100%. If the sun's shining, then it puts you in a good mood and life is good. So,
Yep.
yeah, all good, mate. All good.
I
So,
love it.
yeah.
I love it. There's two British people talking about a staffing podcast, and the first thing we cover is the weather.
Oh, mate,
Fantastic.
you can't beat weather banter, can you? It's it's the king of openers on any conversation.
Love it.
You know what I mean? Particularly out here, because obviously you speak to people in different states, so it's always like,
Hmm.
oh, right,
Yeah.
oh, Miami, right? It must be boiling.
Yeah.
And yeah, it generally is. But yeah, mate, great to see you. Thanks for being on. And
Pleasure.
yeah, I suppose let's cut. Oh, you wanted to talk about Chicago? Yeah. So was in
Yeah.
Chicago last
How was
week.
that?
Yeah. First time in Chicago, loved it. Yeah, I mean, I'd heard great things, obviously, about the city and whatever. But yeah, it just seemed like a much easier to get around, cleaner, more
Hmm.
friendly, quieter New York. That's how it seemed
Yeah.
to me. And I know you gave me some great recommendations. Irish bars were great. Oasis were great, obviously. But yeah,
Yeah.
Irish bars, restaurants, yeah, great. So you spent a lot of time there, have you?
Yeah, so CDW are headquartered there, so I spent a lot of time going back and forth from
Yeah,
CDW. But also prior to that, when I was at Fahrenheit, I ended up running an office there. So I was
yeah,
like, probably 60-40 time spent in Denver and Chicago for about a year. So I
really.
was commuting back and forth. So I got to know pockets of it pretty well.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's in the winter it's different because it's like
yeah.
because you go there and you're like, everyone's like talking about Chicago winters. I'm like, I'm from Denver, it'll be fine. And you get off the plane, you're like, yeah, this isn't too bad. You walk down one street and the wind blows and you're like, fuck, that's fucking cold. You know what I mean? It's like,
Everyone
but
says that. Like, it's the best place to visit at this time of year. Go in January, it's horrific.
yeah, it's different.
I'm sure
So
there's colder, but yeah, that's all we hear. Like winter's
yeah,
brutal. But
but no, it's a good city. Like at first I was like, it's a city with a river. I'm from one of them,
yeah,
and then
yeah, it's like
but
the
now
canal in
it's
Manchester.
yeah. So yeah, very similar, very similar. Not knocking that. Not obviously, as we said already, not knocking Manchester. But there you go.
No, 100%,
So
mate. Yeah, 100%. So look, mate. Yeah, obviously, like I say, great being on. So obviously, just wanted to have a general chat with the guys. So of course, your background, your scale in the US, because you've
Yep.
got a really interesting, multi-layered sort of background, in truth. And even though you say on your headline on LinkedIn is that you're rarely on LinkedIn, I don't actually believe that because you like and engage
I
with all
should
my stuff.
I should
So
preface that.
rarely on LinkedIn. I don't know about that. You're
Yeah.
always on there.
Rarely on LinkedIn for someone in the recruiting industry, I think I should say.
Yeah, that's
You know
true.
what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I'm on there maybe once or 4 or 5 times a week compared to every hour of my life.
Yeah,
So yeah,
Yeah, they stare at it all day long.
yeah,
But yeah, mate. Look, let's go back to the beginning a little bit, with
yeah.
regards to maybe just talking about highlight wise, your background. Obviously, starting at S3, um, and then to be fair, I'd love to get into sort of like the genesis of actually moving out to the US and what all that looked like.
hmm
But yeah, where are you actually from originally, mate?
I am from Ealing, West London.
All right, okay.
So if you've ever been on the Piccadilly line, you've gone through South Ealing. That's my old hunting ground. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, from Ealing, West London. Had spent a lot of time growing up coming to the States, and was playing a decent high level of football when I was growing up. And yeah, so decided at one point that I wanted to see if I could come. Like my brother and sister had done the university system in the UK, and I was like, that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I had initially came out to the States to play soccer at Whittier College in LA.
Right.
I had a recruiting organization that I was working with who marketed me out to a bunch of schools and ended up choosing Whittier.
Right.
Um, and yeah, so never been to the West Coast prior to my college recruiting trip and went and
Yeah.
loved it. And yeah, so spent 4 years there playing soccer there or playing football there, depending on the audience. And then
You was there 4 years, was you?
yeah, so college
Right.
in the US is 4 years. Yeah, yep.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, so your
And where
undergrad program is go
and
on.
where was you based? Sorry, mate. Where was you based again? West
Yeah,
Coast.
it's East Whittier is in East LA.
Ah,
So
right, right, right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Apologies.
So no. So I did my undergrad there, and then obviously played football. And then when it was time to graduate, I met my girlfriend, my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, and she was from Denver. And I was like, you know what, I don't want to go back to England. So I moved to Denver and was doing a master's here while coaching, and coached at one of the colleges here, a couple of colleges here. And to be honest with you, like not to be too cliche, but one of the things as part of my role was recruiting. So I
Yeah.
was recruiting, headed like basically supporting the recruiting efforts of the university to bring players in to the college to play the following years. I got hooked up with a company and started looking at it and going, is there a business behind this? Could you do it? Bringing footballers out from the UK to the US and doing that. I found there was a few businesses to do that, and yeah, I kind of thought that that might be a direction I want to go. Came back to the UK with my girlfriend at the time, my wife now in tow,
Yeah.
with this idea we were going to settle in the UK, and I was like, I need a job. And I was like, I liked recruiting. I wonder if there's a recruiting industry, right?
Yeah.
Because recruiting is one of those things. Like, not you don't grow up going, you know what, I want to be a recruiter. You know what I mean? I want to work in recruitment.
No.
Um, and so I kind of found it, and went through a bunch of interviews, found S3. I think it was Lucy Rees who interviewed me initially. I met, if you
I
remember that
remember.
name.
Don't think
Yeah,
so.
Met Matt McManus, met Paul Maguire, met Seba, met Steve McInerney, met all of those, like the
Yeah,
old
yeah,
school
yeah. All the old
group
guard.
in
So that was 2000.
SW.
That was 2003, was it?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it was 2004, beginning of 2004, I think it
All right.
was.
Post float then.
So no, it was before the float.
Was it?
It was before the
I
float.
thought that was
Yeah,
end
yeah.
of 2003. I could be wrong though. But yeah, fair enough, mate.
I might have
Yeah.
my years mixed up, but
Oh
yeah,
no,
no, it
sorry,
was
you're right. It was 2005. You're right. It
okay.
was 2005.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I was there. I was worked to kind of worked to perm there initially, with a focus mainly on networking.
Yeah.
So networking and telecom at the time. So working that side, and then um, was in London, and then they needed somebody else to go out to Reading. So was basically doing working in Wimbledon, and then moved out to Reading for a bit.
Yeah.
And Ealing to Reading was like on the train was 40 minutes. Ealing to Wimbledon on the train was an hour and 15, depending on the day. So,
It used to be mad
so
train commutes down to Wimbledon, didn't they?
oh mate,
People were
well yeah,
doing
it's
like
like
2 hours each way and all that, and
the
doing
district
12 hours in
line,
the
right?
office.
how the district line even still works in London blows my mind. Because when it rains or there's leaves on the line, it doesn't work. And we've already covered. You know what I mean? 300 days a year, you're in trouble. So you
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean.
yeah,
So
yeah. So you went to
but
lovely
yeah,
Reading.
so went to Reading, spent a little bit of time out there, and then we didn't really settle. Like after living in the US, I kind of got used to living here. My wife didn't have a great time in the UK either, had trouble finding a job. And we were like, you know what? She got offered an opportunity back here and she was like, I want to move back to the US. And we're like, all right, you know what I mean? We've given this a decent shot for 18 months to 2 years. And so
Yeah,
basically resigned from Progressive, got married, all within about 3 weeks of each other. Like the wedding was already planned, but all within about three
yeah.
weeks of each other, and then settled in the US. So yeah,
Straight to
it was
Denver.
yeah. So straight to Denver. So we were planning on going. We were planning on staying in Denver for like 6 months, and then heading back out to California.
Mm,
My wife's from Denver, but then we got to Denver, and I was like, I feel like I've been moving for 3 years. Can we settle down somewhere?
yeah,
With
yeah.
the idea of maybe moving somewhere else. And what's that, 22 years later? 20,
Right.
20 years later?
Yeah,
20 years
right.
later, we're still in Denver. So yeah, there you
Fair
go.
enough, mate. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And you joined Bradsby Group. That
Bradsby Group.
what did
Yeah.
you?
Yes.
I suppose just before that, like obviously you went out there, you knew the S3 way of doing things, obviously, and we
hmm
knew, we know what it was all about. Back then it was, quite a, structured, heavy sales sort of
Yeah.
environment. What was your experience at that point with regards to going to the US? I'm assuming you spoke to a few firms, and
Yeah. I
what
also did.
what were the
I
big
also did
differences
90
that you've
days.
seen, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I did 90 days in another firm as well that isn't on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah,
I just choose not to put it on there, but I did 90 days there. It was one of the national brands.
yeah,
Um, and I just, to be honest with you, like after those 90 days, I was like, if this is how recruiting's done in the US, I don't know if I want to do it.
yeah.
Um,
What was
yeah,
it
no,
like?
I think it was like a 20-person office. Four or five people had the ability to impact revenue.
Yeah,
It seemed pretty lopsided in terms of leadership and, all of those pieces. And it wasn't very dynamic, right? It was very, it felt more like call centery,
yeah.
kind of
I
not
bet.
very, not, yeah, a lack of dynamism, to be honest with you, and just a lack of people who really, you know, like compared to you walk on
Come
the
from.
floor yeah, you walk on the floor in a sales floor in England, and it's just you've got a couple hundred people banging the phones and a lot of high energy.
Yeah.
Here it felt like it was like hold music or elevator music and people being quiet.
Them
And
offices
I
that have
remember,
got they've got them
oh yeah,
divided
the
up and
divide the dividers, so you're like sitting there like looking over the top. I'm not the biggest anyway, so I'm like jumping up and down trying to look over to see if anyone else is in the office.
you got to stand in your chair.
um
Yeah.
that's it, right? But no, I think no. So I spent some time there, and I was like, you know what? I'm probably gonna let's see if there's anything else out there. I actually had a client in London that was offering me an internal job in Colorado. Was one of the technology companies. I was like, maybe I could do that, and I was like, let me just throw my resume out there and or my
Yeah.
CV out there and see if there's anything else. I found Bradsby Group, and Bradsby Group when I went in there was 15 people. Um, but and
Right.
then they've grown huge. They're like, they're the biggest perm business in the Denver marketplace now.
Oh yeah.
Single owner, yeah, single owner, like kind of he'd done it before, he was an older guy, but kind of gave me free range to do
Yeah.
it. Like the thing at Browser Group, if you were there after 90 days, you probably had some time to be there. There was
Right.
no there was no training, there was no warm up. It was like get on the fucking phone.
Yeah.
Um,
That's probably suited
and
you at the time.
that was actually probably perfect for me at the
Yeah.
time, right? Like very, yeah. So, and I kind of just jammed through it there. Saw some success initially, sort of 2005. Yeah, 2005 started banging the phones and just, end of 2005 into 2006. Was super successful, ended up being the top producer there, basically until I left.
What sort of
And
numbers was you doing there, mate? Like in terms of
so I was doing perm.
producer versus
So
what you
top
were
produ
doing in the UK?
yeah. So it's different, right? One of the things you figured out when you move to the US initially is that salaries are that much higher.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 25% on a perm fee, that perm fee is that much higher, right? That much bigger, right? Our average fee in London was like 10 grand, right? You're doing 10, 12 grand, that's a big fee.
Mm.
Over here, you're doing 25, 30 grand, right? So there's a lot, you see a larger, just a larger monetary value for every deal you
Yeah.
do. And I kind of took the approach, well, you know, yeah, I was doing 7, 8 deals a month, I think, in London at times, and in Reading as well. Like, was consistent, three, four, five, six, and upwards from there.
Yeah.
And I kind of took that approach to the US, right? And to be honest with you, I've continued that approach. One of my things when I was hiring people was, what's the volume of deals you're doing? Um,
That's a really interesting point, because I think that naturally people come out here and their pace slows based
yeah,
on the fact that they're, based on the fact that, in terms of the commercial value of deal versus,
hmm
it's like, oh, okay, well, if we do like a deal every other month or something, you know what I mean? That sort of mentality. So that's a
yeah,
really
that
interesting
one.
point.
Yeah, no, ours was, and even, so my mentality going in was I wanted to kind of keep the same level of expectation in number of
Yeah,
deals. And
yeah,
that's really what I was focused on, right? I focused really on the front of the equation. Like, my activity will lead to deals, which will lead to money, right? So I
yeah,
was
yeah.
focused on putting as many deals in as I could. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have taken, probably some fees I should have got higher and all the rest of it. But I was like, if I'm doing deals, I'm doing deals. But I think the first few years there, I was doing $1 million a year in perm. So probably, 50 to 70 deals, like,
Yeah.
depending on how we were doing them. The majority of them I was doing like full circle. Like, and this was a full desk environment as well.
Yeah.
So
All right, nice.
yeah, so it was full desk. As we grew and as my book grew, I added people underneath me to kind of help deliver, and then I would
Yeah.
split deals. But I didn't. I think for the first 3 years there, I didn't split a deal. Everything was fully me, front and back, like, so the sales and the recruiting side. Um, and then as the team grew, kind of added people to it. But yeah, we were focused in on that side. Um, so I started on perm and everything was great. And then 2009, 2010 hit, where no one was paying a perm fee. And it
Yeah.
got pretty, to be honest with you, at one point I thought Bradley Group were going to go out of business. It wasn't great. The market was awful.
Mm,
There was a lot, there was the recession out there. Um, but I was talking to clients and I was like, what's going on? Where you see, and effectively what had happened is a lot of our clients in the industry we were in, um, they were selling. So we work with a lot of the system integrators, and then
mm,
they were selling gear to customers, and unless that gear was implemented, they weren't getting paid on it. So there were pallets of networking gear sitting across the country, not implemented, but a lot of the customers of ours had laid off all their engineering staff.
right.
So I'm like, what can we do here? Like, can we look at contract for that? So that's really where my contract business kind of took off, like, kind of looking at, sort of, medium term, yeah, effectively what is now SOW based business. We didn't know any better then, but
Right.
SOW based business for really implementation of networking gear. We had a couple of big clients of ours. We had one large client of ours that were doing a smart grid and smart meters before they were something out in the market, before they were, well known in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And we had a team go in there to our customer and say, you can't put these on people's houses because you're going to cause a security issue. That turned into a huge project to secure all these things. We got pulled into a customer that were doing um, the, like, US Census Bureau. They had
Yeah.
a huge project that year. They needed 100 engineers. We supplied like 70 of them. So we were
Wow.
based on where we positioned ourselves pretty well, and got in a position that we were successful. But I think the total number of billers in there was still probably under 100.
Really.
That we were
Right.
doing on contract. But it was a good eye opener for me going into that, seeing what you could do with contract, because all I'd known was perm previously.
Yeah.
So.
And did you find that in terms of sort of like, you arrive in and, doing your thing or whatever, I suppose, what were the differences that you've seen in the sort of American sort of business development strategies or go-to-market strategies that you sort of like seen difference, you know, when you
Yeah, I
first
think I
arrived
think
and
the
what made you successful? Was there much difference in
um
terms of what you were just transplanted what you did back home, or did you start refining it and changing it on, that
I
kind of
started
thing?
refining it. I
Yeah.
think the I was a little bull in the china shop at first.
Yeah.
Like, like send a CV, call 15 minutes later, that like thing. Then, but I don't think was ready for that at that point. Maybe it is now,
Like,
but
who's this guy? That was
yeah,
probably
yeah.
about the time that there were no other Brits there. Like this mad Brit
Who
guy.
the fuck is this Australian? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so so Yeah, but no, I think yeah, I had to temper my ambition a little bit and kind of
Yeah,
temper like, sort of the, let's say the assertive, not the aggressive, the assertive nature of what we were doing. And kind of mold it a little bit as well. I think one of the things as well, that I kind of saw was, yeah, you didn't have to be confined to your geography either. Like Brasby Group were a
mm,
national firm. They didn't have offices all over the place. You didn't have to be worried about stepping on people's toes.
yeah,
So for me, it was like, I'm just going to go find replicable clients all over the place and see if I
yeah,
can find, have a skill set, market a skill set, drive that forward across the board. But, in terms of my approach, I still was looking at, I still was pretty KPI driven, to be honest with you,
yeah,
like dial numbers, number of submits, number of job orders, just the general, staffing 101 that I don't think
yeah.
you can ever get away from. That
No,
was dial, that was definitely drilled into me, on the sales floor in London. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
just, be on top of it and everything else. I think it was just my approach to clients was a little bit different. It was a
yeah,
little less aggressive, probably more, um, I wouldn't say passive, but definitely more accommodating to what my
yeah,
clients' needs were compared to what the needs were with us. And I think that's carried on through business in general.
yeah, yeah.
What I found in the US was is a little customer service focused,
Right.
versus sales focused, right?
Yeah,
Very customer driven, like, oh yes, Mr. Customer, no, Mr. Customer, I will do, you know,
yeah,
we'll do whatever you want, right? And that isn't like that didn't really jive with me. I wanted to make sure that we still did have an edge to us. It just
yeah,
wasn't,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, yeah,
It was.
you couldn't go right like it's a different, it's obviously a smaller market than London, right? So you can't just go, well, fuck you then, I'm not gonna bother. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, good point. Did you find that you sort of like started? I suppose in line with what you're saying there. Bit more of a kind of like when you landed with a client, you tried to do everything. Bit more land expand. I mean, you're
no,
saying
well,
in
not really.
networking,
You know,
it was
to be
networking
honest with you,
focused, but
no, I
yeah,
stayed. I stayed pretty. There was an IT team there that we kind of sat alongside as well. That was
yeah,
more general IT, and we bring them in for different bits and pieces.
right,
But for Brasby Group, no, I was pretty laser focused in terms of areas we'd go after and the
right,
type of business we would do. And to be honest with you, that served us really well. Like I remember in 2009. I think it was 2009, maybe beginning of 2010, a client called us and was like, "You're the third company I've called, and you're the only one that's still in business." And it was like, "Oh, well, first of all, why the fuck are you calling two other people before you called me? I thought we
yeah,
had a better relationship than that." And second of all, like, are they, I was interested, and I was like, are they specialists or are they generalists? And
yeah,
now they're more of your IT generalist companies. And those were the ones that were going out of business.
right,
And that to me was like, yeah, that kind of solidified my thinking that specialization was kind of the key to what we did and
yeah,
vertical market specialization and all of that. So
yeah,
yeah.
100%. So you were there 6 and a bit years, 6.5 years
Yeah, yeah,
almost. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And what?
yeah.
How did that come to a close then? What was it? What did the business look like towards the end, and what were your reasons for looking to potentially move on at that point?
Let's put it nicely. Me and the owner had a little falling out, and so it was time to move on. It was probably time to move on before when I was there for a while. It was like I had to wait for someone to die or retire in order to move my career forward. Like,
Really? Right.
their idea of expansion was do more deals, and it just, it's
Mm,
fine for like, where we were, but yeah, I think from my perspective, it was time to go. Um, and so yeah, ended up leaving there and yeah, ended up, went back to England. It was like around Christmas time, went back to England for like Christmas for the first time in forever. Took my family with me and
mm,
that was good. And then came back to the US and was like, I found Fahrenheit, who I then went to, who were acquired by Attain. They were headquartered in Denver,
yeah.
but I'd never heard of them.
Yeah.
And so I got talking to the CEO, a guy called Howard Brill, and Howard was they kind of grown through acquisition, they'd grown different bits and pieces,
Yeah.
but they'd never done any business in Denver. Howard was well connected in Denver, and he basically said to me at one point, he's like, I didn't want to ask my friends for business, right? Because
Right.
he had a good social network, he had a good business social network, he was part of the YPO group and that sort of things.
Mm.
Hopefully, I can say that. I don't think that's confidential. Maybe it is. I might have to check that, but um,
It's like the
but he
secret
was, but
handshake club. Yeah. Like okay.
something like that,
Yeah.
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 Like, but he had a lot of, there was a lot of stuff they were doing, and he basically said we're looking at expanding. we're opening offices across the country. We've just bought this company, Fahrenheit,
Mm.
and we're looking to expand the brand through technology. And they offered me a position in Denver to basically start up a Denver brand for them, or Denver branch for them. Never been here, kind of trailblazing. Didn't even have office space. Was in the corporate office with a whiteboard, drawing stuff out and different
Yeah.
customers and everything else. And really, that was awesome. A lot of people were like, "Well, why didn't you start a business when you left Bradsby Group? Like you were, kind of."
Yeah.
And I'd never run a P&L at Bradsby.
Mm.
And I think had I just gone out and started a business then, had that been the way I'd gone, I,
Was you
th-
managing?
I
Was you managing
yeah, yeah,
people?
yeah, I had a
Yeah.
team of like 7 or 8 people, or 5 or 6 people reporting to me, and but it wasn't. It was more production management. It wasn't,
Mm.
kind of full blown
Yeah.
financial management.
Yeah.
Um, and I wanted to run a P&L. And, had I not had the experience at Fahrenheit, I feel like had I gone out and started a business at Bradsby, I don't think it'd have been all that successul. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'd have put a pile of money in the table and set it on fire and then figured out where it went wrong,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so, I went to Fahrenheit, started, we had great success there. We grew quickly. In comparison to what we did at Locust, it wasn't very quick and it
Yeah.
wasn't very big. It was big in terms of the company we were in. We went from nothing to like I think the second or third highest producing branch in the country.
Nice.
So pretty, within sort of 4 or 5 years. So that was a good turn.
What sort of
And
numbers?
yeah, that was.
Sorry, what sort of numbers did that look like at that point with regards like revenue per head, and for you to be the top performing branch? What did that look
Yeah,
like?
so
I
we
know
were
we're
only
going back
doing we were
a few
only doing
years.
about I think we were only doing 40, like about 40 or 50 grand a week in spread. So it wasn't
Right.
mind-blowing numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a couple parts of the business that were doing 100 grand a week in spread, and
Yeah.
that was always the number that we wanted to get to. But we had, seven or like probably 10 of us in our office doing, IT specifically, and we had broken that down. That was more regional based IT staffing. So we had the networking side, we had a security side,
Hmm.
we had a Salesforce aspect to it. We had like a dev, UI UX dev shop there as well, where we would focus on that type of business, and we would have kind of biz dev leads on all of those, driving numbers and everything else. But my role there was a producing leader, so
Yeah.
producing, setting strategy, driving business, hiring, P&L outside of a couple of little pieces. Um,
Yeah.
it was a shared back office, which was useful because you didn't have to worry about that. But overall, that was a good experience in terms of, really learning how to run a business, kind of
Hmm.
soup to nuts.
Sounds like a perfect sort of lily pad towards doing what
Hmm.
you ended up doing
Yeah.
from where you were, obviously.
Yeah. And I joke because when I started Locust, right, we started it and I always joke that, I kind of done two startups by mistake, or
Right.
by like, and
Yeah.
this was the one where I knew something was going to work. And like with Locust, I feel like I had done it enough that I felt strong enough that we were going to be successful and drive it forward because I'd done it twice before and felt good
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Fahrenheit, I really went in with I had a clear, excuse me, I had a clear plan in mind with what we were doing at Fahrenheit and just kind of tried to wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
Just really drive, trying to drive numbers in the way that we've done previously. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so what was the? Obviously, you were doing well. What did you get that sort of office to, headcount wise, and sort of numbers wise, and then again?
I think we were, I think we were a couple of hundred on billing.
Right.
I don't remember off the top of my head, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe not that high. I think we got to a couple of hundred a few times. We had some big projects that would get us there. Um, but yeah, so that was where we were, and I think numbers wise, I want to say 15, maybe 20 million
Right.
in revenue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
decent.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, but maybe not even 20, maybe just 15. So it was all
Yeah.
right. It was decent.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And what was the? And then was it a drive for you to do your own thing that made you? Was it a sort of, or was that?
Yeah, no, it's kind of, it's one of those things I tell people like, and you probably know this as well, that flame, well, I'm doing that flame of entrepreneurial sort of thing that only gets stronger if you don't do it, right? So
Yeah.
if you feel it in your, if you feel it that you want to do your own thing, that doesn't go away, right?
No.
And it only
Yeah.
gets
You
it
say
only
that
gets
to people a
more
lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
it only gets more as you keep going, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of drive and that. And so there were some changes at Fahrenheit. They got bought out by a private equity company. Um, and it became different. My boss, who was this, I was reporting to the CEO. He then took a step to the side and so wasn't involved in the day to day. So I was working with a CFO who's awesome, like guy out there called Wayne Kavanaugh, super smart, awesome dude. If you've ever seen Ninja Nation, that was his next embark. You know, there's a
I've
Ninja
no
Nation's
idea
like a
what that is.
gym, is like a gym thing.
Oh, is it?
It's like
Right. Okay.
American Ninja Warrior type gym,
Oh,
but
right. Yeah.
he
Right.
started that.
Okay. Yeah.
He started that after he left Fahrenheit as well. But yeah, no, I got, but I was reporting to him and it was just different. You know what I mean? Like reporting
Yeah.
to the finance guy was different. And I saw it as my opportunity to probably jump out and start my own thing. I had a business partner I'd been, who I went into with Locus, who was a client of mine for years and years and years. He was a good mate of mine. We had talked, we had a napkin at one point, a few years prior to doing it, where we had a few too many, few too many adult beverages and a cigar, and we had a napkin drawn out about what the business or what our two
Yeah.
businesses could look like. Because he was a security guy, and ran a vendor agnostic security company. So not just selling Cisco gear, but Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet, like doing threat and vulnerability and pen test and all the rest of it. So they did a lot of that. And we talked about the idea of having a bolt-on staffing company. So as and when projects came in, we could basically
Yeah.
take the staffing company and fulfill them like we had been doing at Bradford Group. And uh, so he went off and started his own company. And then he was like, "Do you want to do the staffing business?" And I'm like, "Not right now." And that's when I went to Fahrenheit. And then we got talking toward the end of my time at Fahrenheit about doing it. And yeah, so kind of packed a bag at the end of December. I think it was 20, ended 2015.
Yeah.
I remember I remember going in. My wife and I had a kid, our third kid on the way. She was 8 months pregnant. Great time to start a business, right? She was 8 months pregnant, and it was just time to leave. I felt like I couldn't, with the changes that had happened at Fahrenheit and all the rest of it, you know, and the thought of leading a team going into a new year. I just my
Yeah.
heart wasn't in it, and so I basically turned around right before Christmas and resigned. Um, and then yeah, basically spent basically started Locust, but not immediately. Like I went in and worked for my buddy's consulting business for a
Right.
while we were kind of getting the foundations laid for Locust. You know, enabled me to burn off a non-compete as well.
Nice. Right. Okay.
And I was super respectful about my non-compete. I wasn't going to go in and like Fahrenheit were a good business. I respected the people there. I
Mm.
actually respected I had a lot of time for the people who I had hired who were
Mm.
taking over some of the accounts that I was working. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Fair enough.
I didn't want to piss in their pool and do all that. I wanted to be at least respectful of it. That didn't stop me getting all the letters from legal companies, but there you go. Um,
Right. Fair
it's
enough.
funny now. It's funny now. It's like when I see things like at stadiums and all the rest of it, and it's like law firms come up, and it's like this company, this you know, this name,
Yeah.
this name, this name. I was like, oh, I used to get letters
Oh,
from
oh,
them.
right, really? Right. Okay. Some familiar
So,
names are still doing the
yeah,
rounds.
yeah, oh, no,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Fair
was
enough.
funny, but yeah, no. So kind of did my time there. It was time to leave, and then started Locus. Um, you know, officially 2017 we kicked off, but really put the groundwork in 2016 in
Yeah.
terms of driving forward. So yeah,
And was that and that was with the founder that you mentioned, co-founder that you
yeah,
mentioned.
co-founder, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
And so
Okay.
we were super lucky and set. I was super lucky and set up. Like they had a business that was already set up. They already had a line of credit. They had
Oh,
different
so
bits and
it
pieces. So
was
we
already
were
live. That was his existing business.
their business,
Right.
their existing business was already live,
Ah,
and I feel like we bolted on to them. We shared HR, who's still with Locus. We shared finance, who's still well, not with Locus now with CDW, and he's still so the HR person Joelle is still at CDW. She's awesome. Stephen Dolk, who was my CFO, basically is now at CDW as well. And they were, you know, and my business partner Greg. Was like kind of the four of us trying to put this all together. And same
yeah.
thing, right? Going into a business, whiteboarding it out, figuring out where we could drive forward, what we could do, where relationships were, leveraging some of their relationships, leveraging my relationships, and really trying to build. Yeah, I think the goal was to build, but my goal was to build the best, you know, the industry leading network security and cloud staffing company.
Yeah.
So not just pure play contract, not just pure play perm, but also with that SOW aspect in it, or the
Yeah.
SOW light, where
Yeah.
we've got like, because over the years we have built a pretty robust network of senior level technologists, great on a keyboard, but not great at keeping themselves utilized, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
They'll
Right.
do, a 6 month engagement, fall off, spend 3 months looking for the next one, get another one.
Yeah.
But we had a really strong network of those guys, and really started putting them to work, like use those guys as our kind of benchmark to go out and really drive relationships, in our customer base, and really sort of driving things forward. The goal was nationwide, ignoring sort of geographical boundaries and that sort of things, and really looking to drive revenue in replicable businesses, and repeatable business
Yeah.
out in different organizations, in different companies.
And was the whole SOW model like prevalent then? Was it like was this a newish sort of way
Yeah, I
of
think it's newish. I feel like staffing companies are still trying. I think people are still trying to figure it out, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I had kind of, until I went in and did it with um, my business partner's company, Allergen, and saw their sort of thoughts around SOW development and drive. Um, yeah, they weren't as, previously they weren't as robust, but at Locus they were definitely on point. And
yeah,
I would say a lot of our business, I would say it was probably a 60-40 split between regular kind of hourly staffing, like
yeah.
just body, kind of, not, I don't want to say body in a seat because that's disrespectful, but
I
what
know
I
what
mean,
you mean.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
billable headcount compared to outcome driven or loose outcome driven business.
yeah.
So yeah.
Project-based solution as opposed to a
Yeah, there you go.
yeah,
Project based solution. That's a more eloquent way of putting
rather than
it.
a bum on a seat, as we like to say.
Boom in a seat.
Yeah, a
Boom
bum
in a
on a seat.
seat. Yeah. Yeah, and I hated that mentality as well, right? Like, I think from my perspective, like, we wanted to be industry. We saw ourselves as industry specialists. We still
Mm,
do see ourselves as industry specialists. That's followed on to CDW, and I think that gave us a really good foothold in the marketplace. Like, we saw there was a gap in the marketplace for what we were doing,
yeah,
that probably still exists today after we got acquired. But really working with those systems integrators, where I think the goal, specifically on the SOW type business, was we'd work with the integrators who were all multi-billion-dollar companies, right?
yeah,
CDW being one of them, where they would get to a certain point with their own internal bench, where they could only go to a certain level. They
mm,
could only do a certain level of fulfillment, then they would be looking for partners. We wanted to scoop up every single piece of that business that fit in our in our specializations. So
yeah. And how did you? Obviously, the business was existing. How big was that
they
sort of
didn't.
tech
So
side
that
of the
business was
business?
completely different, right? So
Right.
that they were doing. I don't know what they were at revenue wise, but they were doing more solution. They were doing more pure SOW based security architecture and that side of things. And we
Yeah.
were we were the staffing piece of that business, right? So,
Yeah.
and really, it was more about incubation. Those, other than having a shared sort of HR piece and a shared finance piece, those businesses were completely separate. Like, we'd support them when they ran into issues with staffing or what have you, where they needed additional people for projects. But
Yeah.
other than that, we were two very, very different entities. I think there was one contract that we leveraged from them, which
Really?
was
Right.
a, yeah,
Yeah.
multinational technology company. Like, if you went down the list, you'd probably figure out who they were, but we were supporting their efforts in there. But other than that, it was really
Your own.
driving business forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Your own
basically, yeah,
leg.
full kit and caboodle, just driving it forward. So
That's interesting. I was gonna. Yeah, the next question was gonna be what was the percentage split between sort of like what you leveraged from your co-founder's business in terms of what you were doing off your own volition and efforts. But sounds like it was all completely separate.
90 10
Almost.
basically. Yeah,
Right. Interesting.
yeah. And so we launched Fahrenheit. Sorry, we launched Fahrenheit. We launched Locus officially in like February or end of January of 2017.
Mm.
Started hiring people, started driving it forward. Brought those contracts over from the legacy business that we put under Locus, because Locus was an entity. It just wasn't standalone doing business by itself, branded and everything else. And we did
Yeah.
that beginning of 17, and really just kind of drove things forward, to be honest. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And what did you start with in terms of like staff? Did you bring anyone over after your non-compete? Did you
So
bring
we
anyone over
Yeah,
from?
so in terms of so non-compete, yeah, there were a couple of people who had left Fahrenheit around the same time I had, or
Mm,
right before that I brought over.
mm,
And then one of the things that, you know, and then there were like three or four people I brought in originally who were people I knew who I trusted, right? You know, the kind of
yeah,
the usual, not the usual suspects, but the people you want to bring over and really help drive the business. And then
yeah,
there was someone from Bradsby Group we brought over, and she's been awesome as well. Um, but then it was I didn't really want to just do a baby Fahrenheit or a baby Bradsby Group, right?
yeah,
I wanted to see what the market had out there, and we basically went out and started hiring people that you know through the same process as everyone else does, right? Like finding people, obviously we used a couple of rec to rec companies, Clarity, being one of them, right? So, and then really just drove forward with success, from there, to be honest with you. So it was,
yeah,
kind of no stone left unturned in terms of what we were doing. And, yeah, we're everybody who we hired, the majority of people we hired were pretty successful. So,
yeah,
there was a couple of people we had to, go through,
yeah.
and all the rest of it. But other than that, it was relatively successful. So
And your strategy around hiring was experienced, high performing,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
guys, no trainees, none of that.
no, we weren't really set up to do it. Like,
Yeah,
had we evolved the business a little further, we probably wouldn't have needed to get there.
yeah,
But the majority of people we were finding were either, you know, the majority of them had, a minimum of a couple of years experience. Like we
yeah,
were a great business for that second or third job,
right,
right? Where we had a strong, like a aggressive comp plan, an aggressive growth comp plan, the ability to support people's growth and that side of things. But we weren't going to incubate people, right? We didn't have time for hand holding. I was still doing deals. The leadership team was still doing deals. Everyone was involved in, you know, the revenue, growth of the business and the margin growth of the business.
yeah,
And so we weren't a great spot for, you know, trainees.
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I suppose you could probably throw a few in, but again, if you're all sort of like all hands to the pump, reasonably flat structure,
Yeah, and I think I have a tendency to, people probably who work for me will tell you, like I have a tendency to try and push people to capacity too. So I didn't really give them much of an opportunity to do anything else,
right,
So yeah,
fair enough.
in a nice way, not like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? But like in a nice way, like we try
No,
to,
I
you
think.
know,
Well, I mean, this is the thing with trainees, isn't it? Is the fact that not. Let's be honest. A lot of trainees who get into recruitment don't really know what they're getting themselves into, and they don't really know
right?
how long term they want to be in it. And
Yeah.
obviously after 3 or 6 months, sometimes less, they decide they don't. So you need an
Well, it's a
environment.
revolving door industry, isn't it? Right.
You,
So
you
it's
you
like
need to be
it,
set up for it. I think is the
yeah,
is the thing, and quite right. You need to have an environment and a structure, and you need to have dedicated, training schedule and plan, and a management
yeah.
team that can support on that. And if you don't have it, then like you say, you're going to burn even more than what is average.
Yeah, and I think the thing was we were moving toward that.
Yeah,
We were moving toward that. I was looking at different space in terms of office space and all the rest of it. Going to invest in a little bit more brick and mortar than we had already, and then COVID hit.
yeah,
So
right, yeah,
yeah, so it was like we went fully remote basically from March of 2020. And I didn't think that. I don't know if there's I'd love to see if people were able to help develop a recruiting business with newbies and trainees in a fully remote environment. Like that would be, I don't know
so
how you would do that. Like I was a full rah rah in the office, like learn by osmosis, kind of
yeah,
everyone in it together. Going remote was one of those things that wasn't in my nature, right? And
I
so when
assumed
we
maybe you was already doing that because
Yeah, there
um,
was a little bit of hybrid there. Like when we were hiring, because there was an aspect where we were like we wanted to hire the best across the country as well. Like
yeah,
we weren't just focused in on Denver, right? But from a BD perspective, from a sales perspective specifically, we were open to looking across the country and really
mm.
focused in on that. So those guys were remote, and that was okay. Um, but the majority of everyone else was in the office, all the rest of it. So yeah.
So you change not change the culture, but you change your strategy almost post COVID around that because then it was like
Yeah.
based anywhere.
During yeah, and like talking about all hands to the pump, COVID was one of those pieces as well that was just like fucking hell. Like I've done, like I kind of leaned back into what we done in 2009, 2010 where I was just like, I'm gonna have to put this company on my back and drive it to like make sure it survives, basically.
So
Um,
what was your headcount at that point going into COVID? How many guys did you have, and what did your numbers look like?
that's a good question. I'll probably need to get back to you on that about where we were.
Yeah,
I want to say we were right around revenue rise. We were right around 20 million.
right.
So we were doing all right.
Yeah,
Headcount wise, probably a dozen or so of us,
right.
so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
not crazy. Like I kept
yeah.
it pretty lean as well. Like one of your prep questions is what would you have done differently? And I think like I probably would have put more, hindsight being 2020, and no pun intended in it being 2020, but like, prior to 2020, we probably should have hired more, probably put more investment in, in more people versus running everyone to capacity, added more folks in, layered in more sales, more recruiting. But we just really didn't get there. And everything felt was really, really fast. And then COVID hit, and it was just like, all right, this is we got to be,
Mm,
all guns blazing here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So.
And how did? Yeah. So obviously going through that period, when did you start seeing a bit of a market? Well, I mean, how severe was it? You just said there that you obviously put the company on your back, and obviously, led from the front and, driven it. But
We
what,
had
how bad
two
was it,
we
and
had
how quickly
two
did it recover?
areas we had two areas that we were really fortunate in. We ended up there was one contract that we got through, I think I'm gonna say it's through CDW, and it
Yeah,
was one of the fast casual restaurants. Fast casual restaurant doing, I think it was 5,000 brand new store openings across the country.
yeah,
Um, and all of that was networking, rack, stack, deploy. And they didn't have a partner to do it. They came to us and said, could we figure this out?
mm,
This is the middle of so we built teams in order to go out and do that. Those teams were amazing. They were flying throughout COVID. They were doing all the rest of it. They were going, a store a night, but basically rebuilding these storefronts. So from a technology perspective, so it was easier to do kind of e-commerce and that side of things for these stores and everything else. And it was that project was important for us as a business in terms of keeping, making sure that we had good headcount. At one point, I think we had 25 people out on that project
right,
doing different things across the country. The other thing that started happening, one of the things that we did um, as part of our security practice was incident response restoration. So somebody gets hit with ransomware, our experience was the IR company would go in and say, all right, we've cleared your environment. Here you go, give you the keys back to the customer. And I think the customer a lot of the times got basically, a box of Legos back with no instructions, right? There are
right, yeah,
bits of technology everywhere. Things weren't working. Either they paid the ransom or they didn't, and it was a mess when they got the business back. We came up with a plan to basically parachute in teams like architecture, engineering, basically to come in and help rebuild these customers, right?
mm,
So it was networking, it was a lot of networking, a lot of storage, a lot of server build, a lot of sort of database rebuild and that side of things. And we parachute these folks in. And at the time, 2020, it was like one or two a month that were hitting, and
right,
these were like, I think the biggest one we had was 40 people,
right,
and it was rebuilding this whole. It was a huge multinational company that we went into and helped rebuild.
nice,
And so I started, from a biz dev perspective, I started marketing that to the IR companies, saying, "Hey guys, when you're running into these situations, let us know because we've got a team here that's set up to help build and rebuild environments." And that was a really good business for us. Like
yeah,
going, that was a very, very good business for us and helped us, really, get through 2020 a lot. And there was, I think I want to say we were probably a couple of hundred people at 20 million
right.
doing that. And that was a mixture of, traditional staffing and, kind of the SOW based work, but it was a
Contractors out,
lot of that type of work. Yeah.
contractors running at about 200.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Across 12 heads.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
We were going.
And what was the average sort of, you know, weekly spread
Like
or
weekly
weekly
GP, we were going.
contractor?
I think weekly GP, like I think we all, we target anywhere between 800 to 1,200 a week in spread. So
Right,
pretty healthy margin. You know what I mean?
right.
So
My math isn't good enough to work that out, but it sounds like a lot.
yeah, it was these. Yeah, but, like that was what we targeted. But then there was stuff that we had there that was in, that wasn't, that was $400-500 a week in spread as well.
Well,
So it
that's
was,
like, well, actually, call it a grand a week, 200. That's 200 grand a
yeah,
week. spread across
Yeah,
12
we were
countries.
probably a little less than that at that period. But yeah, that was
I
what we were
mean,
targeting.
Christ, 200 grand a week off 12 people is pretty strong in it. So
Hmm.
okay, so that was at what point? This was just coming out of
That
COVID,
was
was it?
probably coming out of COVID 2020, 2021.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Um,
Great.
and going with everyone going remote, that really helped us, right? Because it
Yeah.
really supported our business model of being nationwide, supporting the integrators, um, doing, kind of doing that type of business. We were really successful in there. Around 2021 was the first time that CDW approached us as well.
Right. So that's
So
interesting. So yeah, moving into that. So
yeah,
what was your plan for the business really when you was at this point? And did you
it's
think, oh,
funny, right?
this is going to
Because
be a founder led thing for a while? How big did you want to get? What was your play? What was your plan?
so we were fully supported revenue wise and margin wise, through ourselves. We didn't take on any outside money, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you
there was
saying
no
that.
PEO. Yeah, there was no
Yeah.
PEO. There was no factoring in there. So we would live out of we'd established a really good relationship with the bank as well. So they had given us, good line of credit and everything. I don't think we ever used it, but they had given us good line of credit. We felt confident about our ability to run payroll. This is one thing I would say as well to anyone who's thinking about stop running a staffing business. Yeah, revenue great, margin great, everything else. Payrolls are fucking night, like not a nightmare, but it freaks you out, right? Like, when you've got, so at the end we had about 300 people billing for us.
Yeah.
I think it was about 1.5 to 2 million bucks every 2 weeks that we were doing in payroll. And that, checking the bank account on a Tuesday night to make sure payroll goes out on a Wednesday is a legitimate concern, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so anyone, so like there's an aspect to it of, yeah, you want to get to 400 people on billing. You want to be on that. But like the aspect of that is, do you have the money to pay them? How far out can you run payroll? Like what is your
Mm,
cost of cash in that? Can you continue to run your business effectively, on your current piece, right? And so we
yeah.
started looking at it, probably in 21 and into 22, going, where do we want to go as a business? And
Mm,
like, I didn't ever wanted to use it in ATM. I wanted to double the business every year, right? Like that was always the goal
yeah.
is really to try and drive forward, double headcount, double this, double that. And we got to the point where I'm like, we were a $50 million business or just there or thereabouts when we were acquired. And it was, if I wanted to double the business from now, I was going to have to take on outside money,
Right.
in my opinion, right?
Mm,
Like we weren't going to be able to continue running payroll the way we were. Our AR was very, very good. Our finance guy, Stephen, was amazing about getting people to pay their bills, which another thing, if you're going to run a business, make sure you don't, make sure um, you're consistent with your payment terms with your customers. Because,
yeah.
we had customers that would go delinquent and they'd be like, oh, we're a big customer. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
there's an aspect there where you've got to be careful with that. But, running a business like that to me would be one of the things I would say is just, yeah, make sure your terms are you know, are consistent because you will
Yeah.
get into trouble from a finance perspective. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think from my end, I was going to have to take on outside money, right? And I looked at it, and you know, I met with the PEOs, I met with some of the VC companies out there, and I probably had a little PTSD from going through Fahrenheit, seeing a private equity company come in there and buy some of them because that
Yeah.
didn't end well.
Well, you hear some
Um,
scare stories, don't you? Um,
yeah, and I didn't want to, like, I'd been used to being my own boss, and I didn't want to feel like I had to. I don't know, maybe it was a pride thing, but I didn't want to take on it outside money and be told how to run the business differently,
I think I
right? Because
remember
we
you
had
telling me
something,
around that time. I think, yeah, that
yeah,
it was like that was
yeah,
something that you was weighing up. Yeah,
yeah. And so CDW approached us originally in 2021, and I was like, yeah, you know what, now's not the right time. Doesn't feel good. Like, didn't really love the idea of going into an integrator the way they were talking about it at that point. Um, and so we continued on, but that definitely was a thought in our mind. We got approached a lot as we continued to grow, by different organizations. There was a couple of brokers that reached out that were trying to get us lined into deals and everything else.
I was going to ask you, did
Um,
you go to market, or
yeah,
was it just based on
we
kind of
didn't. We
inbound?
didn't. We weren't for sale.
Yeah,
Was always just stick, but we would listen, right? And I think there was enough. there was enough interest out there that we were like, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. My business partner wasn't, I don't know if he was 100% in order. Like, he was very silent in terms of what he did. Like, I was
Mm.
running day to day. Initially he was probably more involved, but then, 6, 7 years in, he just exited his other company, sold it to a different business. He was very silent, would show up when it was, for social times and everything else. And, it was a great resource for me to bounce ideas off and everything else. But
Yeah.
he stayed out of my way with, deliberately, like
Yeah.
just because he wanted to help, he wanted to allow me to run the business, which was great. Um, but I think he was getting itchy feet. I think he wanted his money out. And
Yeah.
so, because I think he saw the value of the business increase and everything else. And so was ready to jump. So, um, but yeah, no, I think so we were definitely looking at outside money at that point, and we weren't sure which way to go. And then CDW approached us again at the end of 2022,
Mm.
um, and it was more real.
Yeah.
They'd acquired another business that had a staffing business. They wanted to bolt us into that, which is the part of the business we're in today. They were similar size to what we were doing in terms of, people on the ground and that side of things. Similar size in terms of number of, kind of a little less than us in number of headcount, but revenue wise, we're in a lot stronger position.
Yeah.
And CDW are a $22 billion company, right? And they were our largest client at the time as well.
Oh, really?
And so when they approached us, there was a couple of guys there who approached us. Um, the guys who had just come over in one of the acquisitions, as well as one of the leaders within the business, came over and said, this is what we're trying to do with staffing. We want it as a staffing company inside of our business,
Right.
but very independent, not kind of HR function, but a profit center for staffing and consulting within our business that would support CDW in terms of when they needed support from a bench, but also have the ability to go out to market and drive it forward. And that was really enticing to me. I thought that was a good thing. I think I looked at it from a career perspective for all of our people working for us, and they may disagree with me now. I don't know if they will, but going into a $22 billion company, I thought gave them a lot more opportunity in terms of
Yeah.
long-term growth,
Right.
career growth, everything else. The ability to have the ability to be in more places, not just relying on myself and a couple of other biz dev guys to bring in business, but business
Yeah.
coming in all over the place and it being a lot more, sort of growth focused. And I thought that appealed to me in terms of what they were doing, and the money got real, right? The money they were putting on the table. Like as I said, it was myself and a co-owner, and that was it. And so when we got acquired, like it was a good deal for everyone involved, to make sure that the people who had come along with us were, they got they got taken care of as
Yeah.
well, and we just sort of made
Nice.
sure that we set them up. Like my biggest thing with selling the business, I'm still there today as a strategic advisor we talked about, but the biggest thing with me selling the business was making sure that they had long-term opportunity, they had long-term growth, they had the ability to drive forward, and we put them in a position to be successful. So
Not just a cash out, you know.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. So what? Yeah. So obviously you touched on it earlier. You didn't want to be in a situation where you're being told how to run things and all the rest of it. So how did your role change? Obviously at that point, I'm sure you took some money off the table and whatever, and you know.
Yeah.
Um,
So my role initially, I came in, like the majority of the role that I spent for the first couple of years here at CDW was integrating the business.
yeah.
They had a full integration team, they had a full M&A team. They'd done a lot of acquisitions over the years, but we had gone in. Our business was different and different enough that we needed to make sure that there was some protection there as well.
Mm,
Just co-employment laws, the ability to do, not just W-2, but also do 1099 and corp to corp. And there was a lot of stuff that we had to do in there. There was a lot of foundations we had to lay in order to do that, to make sure we were still successful, integrating the people, integrating the business, just doing all the bits and pieces that we had to do. I was also leading, um, our sales effort, like our biz dev effort,
mm,
from the staffing perspective. So the sales team were reporting into me initially, and that sort of things, like not just the locus folks, but also the folks that were already existing within CDW. And
yeah.
so just really, kind of set strategy, focus areas, and really looking to drive the business as much as we could. Not just in the existing business we were doing. I think they were, CDW had like, hun- you know, a couple of 100,000 contracts with customers. And I
Right.
think we were doing business with a very, very small percentage of that. And so
Yeah.
my goal was like, look at where we're at, look at what we're doing, really drive this business internally at CDW to be a value add to the sellers out there.
Mm.
CDW have, their core business is network, is network security, it's like network security, cloud, infrastructure, kind of the full gamut in
Yeah.
terms of what you do, as well as the services business. Um, there's 4,000 people selling equipment and solutions for CDW. So
Right. Wow.
your customer basically becomes these 4,000 sellers, right? And so you're making sure that basically the goal is to not fuck things up for them. Like we wanted to be the easy button for them to come to
Yeah.
us and
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
we need staffing, we need services, we need this,
Plug
that, and
into
the
this.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, plug into this while making sure, like, our customers within CDW were the professional services teams, while
Mm.
trying not to step on their toes and make sure that they were still felt like, that they had us in there too to help support their business as well.
Nice. And again, going back to the process, obviously CDW are interested,
Yeah.
and everything else, and, looking under the hood, and I suppose what was that experience like, and what was that process like? And,
So
you know,
it's been a while since I thought about it, but I was thinking about it prior to this conversation. If running your own business is like a working MBA,
yeah,
selling a business to a Fortune 50, Fortune 100 company is like a working PhD.
right,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, so um, there was a couple of things I put in here actually. Let me pull up a note.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You might want to edit that bit out while I'm looking for my notes, but yeah, I think there's,
Okay.
I think there's an aspect of it, right? Like, you know, there was definitely aspects within the business that we got pulled up on by the group. So CDW used third party for legal terms, and they used third party, like a big four consulting company, to come in and really do an assessment of our business,
Yeah,
right? And it was root and branch, it was W-2, it was 1099, it was revenue, it was SOW, like what's your paper trail look like? Like it was to that point, right? And I think from our perspective, we'd really looked at, good business hygiene for a long time. Like
yeah,
that was one thing I learned from my co-founder was good business hygiene will take care of a lot of the battles, right?
yeah,
Um, and just making sure that you were buttoned up in that side. So we had gone a long way to doing that just from an ease of doing business perspective.
yeah.
Like we wanted to make sure like our shit was tight just so we didn't have to just so there was no panics, right? And it was easy
Mm.
to run that way, right? From an ownership perspective, it was easy to run if you knew where everything was, right?
Yeah,
If you had the right reporting, if you had the right visuals, if you had the right pieces, you knew where everything was consolidated, everything was in the right place, all your policies were right. Like those are the things that when you're selling a business that acquiring company wants to fucking know,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
you know
Knows
and
how
it
to.
was and it was definitely one of those things where the principles of the business and the way we set it up initially, we were talking about that 7-8 years later when when the big four company came in and we're doing the review. We were talking about why we set up in the way we did, why we ran staffing the way we did, why we did black and white in terms of 1099 and
Yeah,
W-2, like why our job descriptions were written in the way they were from a workers' comp perspective to make sure that we were in a position, that we were in a defensible position, right? And I'm not saying you need to be in a defensible position from a legal perspective, but you definitely want to be in a defensible position to say why you did things in a certain way,
yeah.
especially in that situation, because those were the things that came up, right?
Interesting.
It
Yeah,
wasn't just revenue, it wasn't just finance and accounting, it wasn't just SG&A, it wasn't just, EBITDA, it was the aspects of the business, like the day-to-day aspects of the business of the reason why you set things up in a certain way from a compliance perspective, right?
right.
Coming into CDW, you understand why, right? They're a the government are looking at what they're doing. They're
Yeah,
a public company. They have shareholders, all the rest of it. They don't need, a 300-person staffing company coming in and fucking capsizing the boat,
yeah,
right? So, you know, so um,
yeah. True.
so yeah, I think so we made sure that we were deliberate initially about being in a defensible position. We got better over time. Initially, it was about doing deals,
But
but over time at Locus, we made sure that we were in a defensible position across all of those things, and those were the things that came back during the acquisition process that were really
yeah.
interesting.
Well, that's interesting because at the beginning, you didn't have any idea that you were going to sell in the future. In the
We
future,
were,
but
yeah,
it's
as I
just what
said,
you
we weren't
did.
for sale. Yeah, we
Yeah,
weren't really, we weren't for sale, right?
so just
So,
how you did business. It's how you ran the business. It's like
yep.
you say, good business hygiene. You kept things straight and clean, and that was something that you did just from in terms of running a good business.
I wanted to put my head down at like being the
Yeah,
CEO, being the person of the business. I wanted to be able to put my head down on the pillow at night and
yeah,
feel good about what we were doing. Wanted to
yeah,
make sure our people were paid. Wanted to make sure they had benefits. Wanted to make sure that they had, decent opportunities and everything else. Wanted to
mm,
make sure that, um, but also didn't want to be like, the devil in the detail came out that you'd forgotten about and bites you in the ass, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
didn't want to, like for me, everyone says, oh yeah, surprises are great. Not in fucking business, they're not. You don't want any surprises, right? And I was like, if we can manage the business to the 90th percentile,
Yeah.
right? If we can standardize 90% of the shit we do, I'm doing this, 90% of the shit we do, um, then we can spend our time on that 10%, right?
Yeah,
And my ops team were phenomenal about building it to the point where 90% of the time everything was just wash rinse repeat running like clockwork. We spent our times on the oh shit moments, which were the 10%,
yeah,
but like I can't imagine doing that the reverse, right? Like, and none of the businesses I worked for really had ever been the reverse, but that was always my fear, right? Especially with you know I didn't want to get pulled down into too many issues with too many different people in order to, I wanted to make sure that the issues were important ones and they weren't what I was doing all the time,
yeah.
right?
Of
And we
course.
wanted to manage to that 90th percentile to make it consistent across the board and, make sure you could get some sleep at night.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So obviously that went through. Your role
Yeah.
changed, obviously, and I suppose maybe even like just flipping it into you, like personally, you know, what at this point did I mean, yeah, how did you? Was you obviously, of course, you was happy about it. You got a good deal, I'm sure, and all the rest of it. But what was you happy then with regards to how your role was changing and what the future looked like, and did you? Yeah, how
Yeah,
did
I
you? How
really
did you
like the
feel
people.
about
I
it
really like the
personally
people I work with.
for the
Yeah,
future?
personally, I really like the people we work with. Like, there are obviously teething issues. There are obviously some things like, what we found when we came into CDW is the things that we had worked on and focused in on in terms of reporting and different things were very, very good,
Mm,
and were adopted by the team we were in CDW. Right, so they weren't quite as focused on the things we were, but they were doing different bits and pieces,
mm,
and I think we were able to add a lot of quality and a lot of um, aspects of what we did as a business into CDW, which is great, right? I really like the people I work with. Like my boss, more his problem than mine, I think, is a guy called Christian Teague, and Christian's been awesome.
yeah,
We kind of see things the same way. Like what's been nice is, I think we can both put, our egos at the door. Like we've never had a knockdown drag out about anything. It's always
yeah.
been very,
Your
yeah,
values
very business
aligned.
focused.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and I think he'd been through enough staffing businesses as well, to do that. I think the team that CDW had put together over the time, were very good as well, so that made
mm,
life easy. There hasn't been a lot of what the fuck are these guys doing kind of
yeah,
mentality, in what we're doing, and so that's been good. Like I think my own role, like I also look at it as the fact that it's changed to a certain extent, but probably in a good way. Like
mm,
I don't have to be as hands on with everything all the time,
yeah,
and that's been an interesting shift and an interesting dynamic. To feel like you can go on vacation and there's other people who can take care of stuff while you're out.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm not running out of kids events on the phone.
yeah,
Like there's
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a little bit
You're not
more
on
freedom in it.
all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's to be honest with you, the biggest thing that was one of the bigger things that you know I had to transition to as well, right? Like so that's been an interesting transition personally. So yeah,
interesting. And what does the business look like today then, in terms of kind of,
fuck it,
I
it's
don't know,
it's
not
flying.
CDW, but
Yeah,
your,
yeah, no, but the
your
business
business.
that we're running now, like, it was a great acquisition, right? And
Mm,
I'm not just saying that. Like, I think it was a really good acquisition for CDW. I think it was a really good acquisition for everyone who worked for us. I joked that it was a great acquisition career-wise for everyone except for me because I kind of worked myself out of a job. But there
right.
you
Yeah.
go, say la vie, right? But um,
I'm sure you're well compensated.
yeah, yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah, yeah, no, no worries there. They take care of me, right? They've done a good job about making me feel welcome. But the business is flying. Like it was definitely 2 + 2 = 5, right? Like
Yeah.
our business coming in, the existing business they had, some of the best practices they had, some of the best practices we had. We put it together, and this business is absolutely taking off. Like it is up to the right within CDW. We've been really, really successful within the company. We're growing customer bases. We're doing the things that like kind of, when you look at it from a 10,000-foot view, what you wanted this business unit to turn into, it's well on its way to doing that. It's got great leadership. It's got, very, very solid salespeople. The business is like, the feedback we get from the CDW seller community, who's really our main contact to the
Yeah.
customer base, love what we do. Bumps along the road, obviously, bumps along the way, obviously. Like,
Yeah.
but to be honest with you, 90% of it has been really positive, and we refine the 10%, right? We
Yeah.
get
Of
better
course.
every day,
Yeah.
and increase headcount, increase margin, increase revenue, increase, all the metrics you're looking at in terms of a business have increased, and we haven't gone out and hired like 100 recruiters. We haven't gone out
Yeah.
and hired 100 salespeople. Like we've maximized the folks that we've got in, and we've really added, you know, um, good people into good parts of the marketplace in order to help them grow.
Right. Yeah.
CDW did a lot with partners like Locust were a partner of CDW. We were really appreciative of the business. Now we're shifting it's a bit of a paradigm shift because we're trying to do as much as we can without the use of partners anymore.
Really. Right.
You know,
Okay.
we feel like we're in a better position to support the business. We feel we're in a better position to drive things forward, and we feel like we're a more profitable option than going out to the third party market and hoping you find someone.
Yeah. And what does the business look like? I don't know if you can share, and if you can't, it's not a problem. But in terms of like, revenue, like spread now,
Revenue and spread, I can't really talk about.
you're not
It's,
right.
if we were doing, Locust were doing like about 250 to 300 grand a week in spread when we got acquired.
Yeah.
It's a lot more. It's more than double that. Headcount is more than, is almost 3 times what we had at Locust when we sold it
Right.
around 300. Right. So,
That's good enough.
revenue. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a monster, and
Yeah.
it's moving, and
Amazing.
it's going really, like, from that like that is really positive. And like as I said, like, um I think Christian Teague, who I work for, and his team have done a really, really good job navigating. They put a really good foundation in to help navigate what it takes in order to be successful in a $22 billion company that don't do the business we're in.
Yeah. Man, that's amazing.
Like, I don't know if I'd have had the patience for that. Or
Yeah.
they
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, let's reverse that. I don't think they would have had the patience for me doing it, because it would have been a bull in a china shop again. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So
So they've got some scar tissue, so they know what kind of look for, and that would,
yeah,
yeah, fine. So I
yeah,
suppose if you was giving some advice to people, that have either, that are either launching out here, scaling out here, going through, or have a plan to go through a journey towards
yeah.
exit, what advice would you give people that are looking at any of those things?
Um, depending on where they're at depending on where
Yeah,
they're at in the evolution, like, have a plan and work it,
yeah,
right? Don't get too distracted. Make sure you're focused in on the areas that you want to focus in on. We already talked about good business hygiene. Try and get, like, a lot of times initially it's about doing deals, right? Like, do deals, but trying to make them so it's not, that every deal is not different, right? Try and
mm,
make them replicable and everything else. And this is pretty basic business 101 type stuff, but it
yeah.
comes back, like, it comes up
Sounds
every
simple.
day, right? It does sound simple. It's just doing it. Doing it at volume is the hard thing, right? And
Mm,
anyone coming out from the UK into the US, we're two business kind of communities separated by the same language. Do
mm,
not think, like, you saw that with a lot of the brands that came out originally, right? I've forgotten who it was. Like, there was a bunch of them that came out, and it was like, had an
oh,
office in Jersey, had an office in New York,
yeah,
had an office in Philly, had an office in Boston, have an office in there. And I'm just like, whoa, like, that's a lot of infrastructure for a market that doesn't really,
yeah,
that is more, the US market back then was more migratory. You know what I mean? Like, people would go in different places. It didn't necessarily need to be, you know, like obviously having an office in New York, if you're focused in New York clients, is important, but like
Mm.
New York and New York and Dallas are completely different markets, right? New
Yeah, yeah,
York, Dallas and Austin are completely different markets. So I think for me it was always like, service your customer based on where your customer is. Don't go, well, we want 20 offices across the US. Well, why would you have 20 offices across the US if you only need four or five? You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like for me, it's like, be more strategic than just going, oh, well, we're in this city, so we want to be in this city. I get that, right? Maybe you can get there as you grow it, but like I just feel like that approach didn't necessarily lead itself to success. And you saw a lot of these places open and shut, right?
Yeah,
Um,
big time.
you
Yeah.
have to, like I was a full desk person. I fucking love full desk, right? Um, as I've grown more mature in my career and as I've realized what full desk entails, that's all well and good. I think full desk has its place, but I think it has its limitations
Yeah.
as well.
100%.
I think a full desk person has you have economies of scale. They get to 5 or 6 customers where they're doing 6 to 10 deals a month.
Mm.
They ain't doing anything else,
No.
right?
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. Whereas, the split between biz dev and recruiting, not everyone is cut out for full desk, right? Not everyone
Mm.
is cut out to be doing the full life cycle of it. And so I think that paradigm shift for me was a big one to notice as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then just, I think for me as well, like, if you're looking, if you want to run a successful business, listen to the people around you. Right? Don't be the smartest person in the room. You hear this analogy, right? You're the smartest person in the room. You're in the wrong room, right?
Yeah.
Find people better than you at shit you don't want to do, right? Operations, finance, HR. Find people who are better than you to do that, because at the end of the day, those are the things that you're going to spend a lot of time on. And if you're like trying to do it all yourself, or you feel like you can do it because you know how to do it, like that's the piece that's going to you're going to spend so much time in there versus getting good people to help run the operation side of the business, and that
Mm.
shit needs to be buttoned up.
Yeah.
That's where your legal issues are going to come from. That's where your finance issues are going to come from. That's where your inaccuracies are going to come from. Make sure that shit is buttoned up and you have good people to do it. I was super fortunate with the team I had. They were fucking awesome. Like they allowed me to put my head down on the pillow as well, and they built us a operations function that is still to me today, if I was going to go do it again, which I,
Mm.
I had no plans on doing, but if I was going to go do it again, I'd want to make sure my operations was buttoned up, because that is where that you
Yeah.
can live and die through that.
Well, equally, in order to do that, you've got to have no ego.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, that's where I think a lot of founders not necessarily fail, but of course, they always want to. You mentioned before, you surround yourself by smart people, and you want to be. You don't need to be right all the time. You can be.
Right.
You know,
Well, a lot of time as you grow, right, you're like, I want other ideas, right? I don't want it
yeah,
just
yeah,
to be like, I didn't want it to be like a baby Bradford Group or a baby
yeah.
Fahrenheit or a baby Tech Systems. I wanted different. I wanted the best coming in from all over the place. So I think from my end, it was, you want good people around it. Yeah, like I've got like, don't get me wrong, like I've got an ego, but I also know that I'm not like, there's
You're
certain things
humble
I'm
enough
not
to know that you
great
haven't
at.
got all the answers for everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fair
So
enough. No,
yeah.
that sounds good. And finally, mate, what's the future look like for the King of Denver? Tom Shaw. What's
You
the
know, continuing here at CDW, like I think from my perspective is, continuing to drive this forward and be,
yeah?
add value where we can with them. I'm conscious that the last 10 years went like that, right? Um, I've got 3 kids who are growing up super fast, and 21, like I don't know, it's one of those analogies that, old people will tell young people, oh, it goes so fast. There are periods of having kids that go really slow, and then there are periods that go super fast. And I think the last 10 years for me have just flown by. And so I'm enjoying having the ability to go on vacation. I'm enjoying the
Yeah.
ability to be a little bit more present. But yeah, you never know. Like I think with CDW, like I think from my perspective, it's, I'm excited to see what's next for us. Like I think we've done a great job of solidifying this business within CDW.
Mm.
And I think it's, continuing to grow this entity and grow this business within CDW to get up to, like, the goal was, get to this level, get to that level, get to $1 billion, right?
Mm.
Like I sat down with Chris Leahy, the CEO of CDW, and she's like, this looks like $1 billion business to us. And I'm like, this is 3 weeks into the company. I'm like, all right, well,
Let's go. Yeah,
thanks.
right.
Yeah, no pressure. So, so
Yeah,
there's that. So I think from our perspective, it's really just continuing to drive and, like I think we've got a great foundation as a company to move that forward and to get to that, to get to those sorts of numbers. I
yeah.
think the foundation that we've laid has put us in a good position. I think it's just continuing to do that, right? For me personally, stay here as long as they want me around.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Oh,
Yeah.
listen, mate.
So
Congrats on
thank you.
everything you've achieved, and I know we was like chatting through the not through the process, but we chatting
Yeah.
here and there, and like I say, mate, I'm really really pleased for you that it's gone as well as it
Yeah.
had, and like I say, congrats to you and all your success, and yeah, it's just great to see you, mate. So yeah,
Yeah.
loving it. So
Hopefully that's been interesting. It's not a cure
no,
for
mate, you've been,
insomnia, right?
mate. This is belting. This is exactly what we're looking
Yeah.
for. So someone who's
Yeah.
got, who's been through all those different journeys that you've been, from S3 coming out to the US at such an early part of your career. Where if we talk about the traditional kind of Brits coming out to the US, let's be honest, it's
Yeah.
really only exploded the last 10 years or so. You was out here 22 years ago, or
Right.
is that right? Or 20 years
20,
ago?
yeah, 20 odd years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So you've and obviously, of course, you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly a little bit. You've joined a firm that wasn't quite right, and you've been through that launch and startup process. You've obviously built a really successful business, and you've been through that exit with a multi-billion-dollar business. So yeah,
Yeah.
really interesting, mate. Great insight. Thank you so much, and
Yep.
yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, no, I think I did, I think the funny thing about it is I go back to I still go back to the fundamentals of what we did originally, right? Of how the business worked, day one. I still go back to the fundamentals of, kind of the staffing one or the recruiting 101, recruitment 101
Yeah,
type stuff. And it's hard to get away from, right? It's such a linear business that you can definitely see success through the pieces. And I think from my end, you know, it's been a good ride. I think long may shall it continue, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So yeah.
Good man. Good man. All right, mate. Thanks so much.
Rock and roll. Thanks, guys.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode was brought to you by Clarity R2R. Clarity R2R are a leadership recruitment to recruitment firm specialising in hires from AVP and business manager level through to board. We work with firms both founder-led and enterprise level. Should you wish to know more, please do get in contact.